Hey everyone, Dara Posner here, life coach at Mud Coaching, and I am so thankful that you have decided to join me for my first official episode of Digging Deep with Dara, where I discuss all things self-love, my absolute favorite topic of all time. And today I wanted to spend just a few minutes defining self-love for you. What is self-love? Basically, I have identified three things that define self-love. The first thing is more or less what I like to consider the essence of self-love. So self-love in essence is a way of experiencing yourself. I would argue that it is the most optimal way of experiencing yourself. When you love yourself, you experience yourself as what it is that you really and truly are at the core. You experience yourself as your true nature. And what is that? It's love. When you love yourself, you experience yourself as love. Self-love is experiencing yourself as love. So it's self as love. That's the way I like to remember it. The second defining characteristic of self-love is how that then translates into how you feel when you go out into the world and how you live your life. And it's more what you believe. It's the belief system that is at the core of a self-loving experience, a self-loving life. And that belief system is, I am worthy. I am worthy, I am enough, and I am adequate. Loving yourself is knowing at the core that you have an innate worthiness. Your sense of self-worth comes from the inside, comes from the deepest part of yourself that knows itself to be love. And finally, the third characteristic that I have identified as defining self-love is energy. When you love yourself, you have tons of energy for life. Love is enlivening, and so you have a very energized spirit when you love yourself. That's a very different experience from people who don't love themselves, because just think about, maybe this is your experience, of how much energy goes to trying to ascertain or acquire self-worth from the outside. The amount of energy that goes to things like seeking approval from others, or seeking validation from others, or worrying about what other people think, or concealing parts of yourself because you're afraid of being judged. That and so many other things zap you of your life energy when you do not love yourself. So hopefully you're starting to really realize why it's so important to love yourself. So now you're probably thinking, okay, well, yeah, that sounds great. I want to absolutely know that I'm worthy. I want to have lots and lots of energy. I want to experience myself as love. How do I do that? Well, what comes to mind is this beautiful quote by the late poet and philosopher John O'Donohue, and I want to share it with you. He says, and hopefully I can get this right, there is a place in you that has never been wounded, where there is a sureness still in you, where there is a seamlessness in you, and where there is a confidence and a tranquility in you. All of us have a place inside that is pure, that is unwounded, that is sure, and that is tranquil and confident. Learning to love yourself is really about building a connection to that part of yourself. To be connected to this deeper part of yourself that some people call your true self, or your higher self, or your soul self, whatever you call it. To come into a truly self-loving relationship is to forge a connection with this deeper part of yourself. In my next few videos, I'm going to start going into exactly how to do that. Next week, I'll be starting with the very first step, the very first sort of actionable thing that you can do to start forging this extremely important connection with yourself. But before we get there, I first want to invite you to take the very first step that is absolutely critical if you want to love yourself, and that is to simply decide. I know that sounds so simple, but I really do want to invite you right now to just make the decision that you're going to start loving yourself. And it is okay if right now you don't know exactly what that looks like and how that's done. All I want you to do is make the choice to start loving yourself. I also want to invite you to make 3 promises. And that's only if you're willing to make that choice. But if you're like, done, I'm deciding, I choose to love myself, then the next thing I want to ask you to do is to make the following 3 promises. So the first promise is, I promise to always honor my soul's true path. I promise to always honor my soul's true path. The second promise, I promise to only allow into my life things and people that are good for my spiritual, physical, and emotional well-being, and to reject and remove all things and people that are not. I promise to allow only things and people that are good for my physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being into my life, and to reject and remove all things that are not. And the third promise is, I promise that I will always have my own back, and I will never abandon myself. I promise that I will always have my own back, and I will never abandon myself, or I will never give up on myself. I know that's a lot, and starting next week, we're going to take things in bits. But if you can keep these 3 promises, I guarantee you that you will begin to feel a very deep connection to yourself, and you will understand what it means to love yourself. Thank you so much for being here to watch this episode of Digging Deep with Dara, and I hope you'll be back next Wednesday when I post my next video.